Welcome back to Developing Your Business Plan. We are now on to step 2. Step 2 is going to be our business reflection. So let's dive in. I always say you can't know where you're going until you know where you've been. And that's the whole impetus of this section. It's really looking at what you've done the last year, the last 2-3 years to really understand your business and build on that in this business planning process. Now, I know I had mentioned at the end of the last video, I know some of you are probably thinking this doesn't apply to me because I'm a new agent. I've not done a whole lot of business in the last year, but please continue to watch because I think you'll be able to pull some things out of this that will help you as we walk through the rest of the business planning process. So let's get started here with business reflection. And this is, I think it's page, oh gosh, let me look here in my printed version. I apologize. I think this is going to be about page 4 in your workbook. What we're going to look at is we want to look back not just at 2020, but we actually want to look back at the last 3 years of your business and get kind of a trend going. Wrap our arms around what your business has looked like in the last 3 years so we can start projecting to what it might look like or what it could look like coming up in 2021 in the next year. So the first thing that we're going to look at is our gross volume. How much real estate did we sell in the last 3 years? And you're going to fill in those figures for 2020, 19, and 18. Now, if you haven't been licensed for 3 years, fill it in based on the last year, the last 2 years, maybe it's just the last 6 months. If you've not sold any real estate, this is probably a step that you can skip for the time being. But for those that have been in the business a while, I really want you to spend some time on this step. We've got to understand where you've been to know where we're going to go from here. So again, that first thing that you're going to do is your gross volume. The second one you're going to do is your gross income. And then we're going to start digging a little deeper and going, I want to know how many buyers you closed and how many listings you closed and what your average sale price was by year. And then your closing ratio. This is important. This is going to really, really drive you in the next year. And it's going to be really important when we get to our goal setting. So you know how many listing appointments you need to go on to get one listing. That's a number that a lot of people don't track. They don't track their closing ratio. You're probably looking at me like right now, like I have 3 heads going, how in the world am I going to figure out my closing ratio? It's not something that I track. I'm going to give you the tools to be able to track that in the future. So for now, I want you to go back and just kind of, to the best of your knowledge, figure out how many listing appointments you went on in the past year. Go, if you're using Cloud CMA, go into Cloud CMA and figure out, okay, how many CMAs did I do? Did I get that one? Did I get that listing? Did I get that one? And you can kind of back into it from there. How many buyers did you work with this past year that you showed homes to that didn't buy or decided they're going to rent instead of buying, or maybe they're going to hold off until next year? The closing ratio is a little bit easier to figure out with listings than it is with buyers, but it's important that we know how many people we need to be in front of to make sure that we're closing to do what? To make money, to have those top 2 lines, that income in your gross volume. So important numbers there, and I'll show you in just a minute an easy place that you can gather this. Keep clicking on the wrong thing here. Okay. So the second piece of this, we're going to dig just a little bit deeper when you go back and you look at these numbers. We're actually going to figure out what our source of business was. Now, I know I'm going to show you how you pull these reports in KCH Agent. We've got those categories that are on the sales worksheet. But I want you to try to dig a little bit deeper than that. So you might say, well, it came from my COI. Well, how did that person get on your COI? How do you know them? Are they a neighbor? Did you come across them at an open house? And that's how they landed on your COI. Was it somebody because of your involvement with the PTO? And that's how they landed on your COI. So go a step deeper for me on this so you can really figure out what are those top 5, and you might only have 3. What are your top sources of business? This is critical as we start looking forward. We're going to start figuring out, where do you need to devote and spend your time If your top sources of business are coming from your involvement in the PTO, then by God, you should probably be volunteering more for the PTO, and maybe you ought to run for position on the PTO. If the great source of your business is coming from farming, well, then let's look at your plan for next year and make sure that we're allocating proper resources to farming if that's where your business is coming from. The next thing that we're going to do is look at your market segments. So this is where we kind of start figuring out if you have a niche in the market. Now, I did this a couple years ago with one of our offices. And when I used to do this as a two-step process. So I data dump all of this stuff on you, have you go out and do it and bring it back and we talk about it. So I had an agent that did this. They came back and they go, gosh, Christian, I could have sworn my top market segment was going to be people that are downsizing. I live in, kind of a retirement type of villa community. That's who I network with. That's who I spend my time with. I've got a couple, gals groups and we play cards, and that's my biggest source of business. But as I did this and I dug into the numbers, I realized that wasn't the case at all. It was actually first-time buyers was my number one market segment. And as she dug into it, she realized that her friends, that group that she was socializing with, wasn't moving. It was their kids that were moving, their kids that were buying their first homes, the kids that were moving out of their first homes and buying up into their second. And so it really gave her a mind shift of how she needs to market herself, that she is an expert on first-time buyers, that she is an expert on the move-up buyers, that it's not just the downsizers. So can she spend more time, resources, and allocate some more money into that market segment to grow it? Of course she can. So doing this process and digging a little deeper, going into your sources of business, going into those market segments, will make sure as your goal setting, we're going to reflect back on this and use this information to make sure your goals and your objectives and strategies and that whole strategic plan that we're going to come up with are in alignment with where your money is coming. Where is your income coming from? We can't do that without going through this homework process first. So where do you find this information? There's an easy place to find it now, and that's on KCH Agent. If you log into KCH Agent and you go under the admin tab, there is a reports link. It actually, I apologize, it might be under my career for you all. I apologize. But if you go into that reports link, you'll then be able to pull reports. And the report, and I know this is hard to see on your screen, the report that you want to pull is your agent detail transaction report. And you can pull for 2020, you can pull all statuses because that'll give you probably who's under contract and going to close in the next 30 to 60 days. I would pull it by year. So pull it for 2020, 19, and 18. When you pull it, you're going to get a list of transactions. It's going to total the volume for you. It's going to total the income for you too. And what it's going to do is give you a list of all of the transactions that you've done. And you can go through that list and start figuring out those pieces that were on that last slide and start categorizing your sources of business, categorizing your market segments, and it'll make doing this a whole lot easier and a whole lot faster. Now, if you don't have a whole lot of transactions, if that first slide that I showed here, that first piece of the at a glance, you don't have a lot to put in there, I still want you to go through the process of looking at your sources of business and looking at your market segments. What activities have you been doing in the last several months or since you got your license that have created some potential leads for you? Have you met people at open houses? Have you been successful with that and been able to convert them into buyers that are actively looking with you? What have you done to procure some listings or to get some people into your pipeline? So while some of this reflection isn't necessarily going to apply to you, I still want you to really think back about the time you've been licensed and what activities you've been doing that have had fruitful results for you, and start writing those down. The last thing that we're going to do in your business reflection is we're going to take a look at, and this really kind of sets up part 3, which is our SWOT analysis. I want you to look at what went really well this year. And again, this applies whether you've been licensed for 10 years or 10 days. What has gone really well so far for you? What went really well for you in 2020? I have a feeling doing the second part of this is probably going to be a little bit easier, but what didn't go so well this year? What were some things that you did that didn't produce any results for you that you maybe wasted your money on? But what did go well this year? What were you able to do to continue to procure business, even with the chaos in the world going on? What were you able to do? And then as we get to step 3, we're really going to dig a little bit deeper into these when we do our SWOT analysis. So tune in. That completes our business reflection section. If you have any questions on this, feel free to reach out to me via email, call me. I'm happy to walk you through anything and answer any questions you might have. Again, this is an important piece to gather together as we start going into the SWOT analysis, and really as we start getting into the goal setting. We're going to reflect back and use some of these numbers that you're putting together as we go into our goal setting process and when we get to video 4. But tune into video 3. We're going to walk through a SWOT analysis. It's kind of fun to do one on yourself if you've never done one before. Thank you for watching this one, and I will see you on the next.